Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video I wanted to give my thoughts on the actual virtual tabletop. The last video I spent a lot of time talking about the Creators Summit and Wizards of the Coast and creators themselves that were there, but I never actually got around to giving my thoughts on the idea of the virtual tabletop and kind of this shift away from pen and paper to more digital. And the truth is that my thoughts on this are actually very conflicted because I see both good and bad in this. And I guess I just kind of wanted to talk about the things that I see happening and my general thoughts about it, as well as like my hopes and dreams and my also fears for the future of Dungeons and Dragons. Because I think some of this is really good, and I hear a lot of people just talk doom and gloom about the whole thing. But like when I look at the idea of online play and stuff, and this move to a more digital, virtual type of Dungeons and Dragons, yes, I kind of have a gut instinct to not like it because I've been playing D&D with pen and paper on a tabletop forever, right? And so I kind of see this talk about, we need to monetize Dungeons and Dragons better from all the executives over at Hasbro and stuff, right? Hasbro. Anyways, and so I don't like that kind of talk, right? Oh, by the way, I got my stitches out, so it's starting to look a lot better already. Anyways, so, like I said, I don't really like that. It kind of sounds like they just want to turn the player base into a bunch of pay piggies and just milk us for money, right? But on the other hand, how many gaming groups wouldn't have survived, say, COVID or whatever, if it wasn't for the ability to play online? And like, I don't do a lot of online play. I usually just play in person with my gaming group that I'm with. But, I've played in Roll20 before. Like I said, I had a friend who used to live out here and he moved out east to Ontario. And, we were able to keep playing every week because of Roll20. And I mean, I know in real life a guy here in Canada who's running a game, and his players are 2 Americans, a boyfriend-girlfriend couple in Japan, and a player in South America. And the only one of those people he knew was the boyfriend from Japan, because my friend's also, he's Japanese-Canadian. They met at college here because the other guy came to go to school here. And then when he went back to Japan, they wanted to keep playing. And then his girlfriend wanted to play because it looked like fun. I guess it gave her something to do, and, that way he wasn't ignoring her. So, good on her. She apparently really likes it. And then they just looked for some more players, and they got a couple of American guys and a guy from, I think it's Brazil or Colombia, something like that. That gaming group couldn't possibly exist without online play, And so I look at a lot of the ways that the hobby has kind of evolved, and these are good things in my opinion, It's made the game more accessible, and it's helped to spread it. And, as long as you all have a common language that you can speak, you can play D&D together, And that's something that never could have existed in the past. So I think that these elements are awesome. My fear, though, is, like I've already mentioned, that Hasbro is going to just, do what big corporations do and just try to exploit people for money by, adding in all these microtransactions. You'll have to have, your basic account for D&D Beyond or whatever, and it'll give you these things. But then if you want, more books, you're going to have to pay for those books, and you're going to have to pay monthly subscriptions, and you're going to have to, add different things on and pay fees and microtransactions everywhere. And the truth is, part of that I think is just inevitable. We see that in video games, we see that with television, streaming services, everything, right? Where you can get your basic cable, but if you want the good stuff, you got to pay all this extra for all these other, things that you want to get. And I kind of think that that's just sort of inevitable, even though I don't like it. A really good comparison that I had a friend of mine mention, that he didn't really flesh out the idea that well, but I'm going to talk about it a little more here, but I got what he was trying to say. Because he compared it to, say, like the comic book industry. And for anybody who's watched my channel a bunch, they know that I used to read a lot of comic books when I was young, too. It wasn't all Dungeons and Dragons. There's also a lot of comic books in my youth. And I really love comic books. But in the 80s and 90s, like popular comics like Superman and Spider-Man and Batman, especially Spider-Man and Batman, those were like the big two, right? but they would sell 500,000 issues a month. And, you know, you look at comics these days, and those ones sell like 100 to 130,000 a month. And then the less popular ones, I mean, you could be selling 15,000, 30,000 copies. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, that was cancellation territory. Like, you were only selling 30,000 copies of, you know, ROM Space Knight. Boom, you're gone. You know, like, you're not selling. Now that's considered, you know, 30,000 is fine. Now, granted, part of it could be that comics themselves have just gotten more expensive, right? They use better quality paper and stuff. So you can probably afford to move less single issues when the price is higher. But I gotta imagine that production costs and shipping and everything else are higher too, right? But like, Marvel actually went bankrupt in the 90s, as difficult as that is to believe if all you've seen is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The comics just weren't selling enough by then, and in the late 90s, Marvel went bankrupt. Obviously, they were bought out, and, you know, Marvel's still around, and now Disney just pumps out movies like there's no tomorrow, although some of those have started to fail as well lately. But my point is, though, that if you were a comic purist, like, you know, I mean, I enjoy the Marvel movies. I'm not, and some of the DC movies too, right? I'm not trying to say otherwise here, but I'm saying, like, if you wanted, you know, Civil War the way it was told in the comics, you didn't get that in the big screen. It was just completely different, and, you know, whatever, right? But on the other hand, you can say that the movies have kind of, you know, changed a lot or left a lot out, or some of them don't really have like the heart or the impact or the grand storytelling that some of the comics do. Because when you're releasing a comic a month, you can have one storyline that just builds and builds. Like the Judas contract from the New Teen Titans back in the 80s, for anybody who remembers that. That was an absolute masterpiece of storytelling. We get this one girl who, at first, she's kind of a villain, but then they help her, and it turns out that she's being, her parents are being kidnapped by these terrorists, and they're forcing her to use her superpowers to, like, rob for them and get them rich, right? Then, so the Teen Titans try to help her. They go after the terrorists. They find out that her parents have been dead this whole time, and they've just been lying to her, telling her that she could get her parents back, right? So, eventually, she ends up joining the team. But then eventually it turns out she's actually been a plant this whole time, working for one of the villains. And this is a story, and then of course she betrays the team, and we have the giant climactic, you know, battle at the end and everything else, right? But the thing is, this is a story that had been told over a couple years. And like, we're a year into her run with the team before we even find out that she's actually a traitor this whole time, and that she's been planted with the team. And it was just an absolute masterclass in storytelling. And that's hard to do with a movie where you've got a 2-hour runtime. Now, I mean, Marvel kind of got around that by having a bunch of movies that are all interlinked, but it's still a hard thing to do. And so the movie, just by virtue of being a movie instead of like a TV show or a series of comic books, is going to have to cut things out. It's going to have to streamline things. And that means that a lot of the like really great storytelling that you might have otherwise gotten just won't really be there. But on the other hand, we've had Marvel movies that have broken $1 billion. I think Infinity War might have broken 2, in fact. You know, like, the point is that the comics, as great as some of these stories were, they went bankrupt. The movies have made billions of dollars and have completely changed cinema forever, for better or worse, right? And I think we could say that Marvel Phase 4 was definitely not Phase 1 or Phase 2. You know, there's been a sharp decline, in my opinion. But the point is that they've still, like, changed and found a way to make lots and lots and lots of money. And a lot of those products, like, a lot of them were really good. Like the Winter Soldier, Iron Man 1, the original Guardians of the Galaxy, like, these were great movies. And sure, you can complain that, you know, a lot of the sequels weren't as good or whatever, right? But the truth is that those original ones that I mentioned, well, I guess Winter Soldier was Captain America 2. Captain America 1 was also pretty good, but man, 2 was just, so good. It's like James Bond with superpowers. But anyways, and less cheesy, which was amazing for a comic book movie when you think about it. But anyways, my point is, though, that it's a very, it's a very complicated situation, because for every bad, there's also goods. And there's a lot of like plus and minuses that I think are really hard to evaluate sometimes. And so as much as I look at the virtual tabletop and I see all these possible negatives, I also look at like my friend and his ability to play with people on the other side of the world or all around the world. That never would have happened if it wasn't for this kind of thing. Now, is something like Roll20 good enough? Because Roll20 actually has a pretty sustainable type of model, in my opinion, where they're just like, yeah, okay, here's the basics. You can like pay for a little bit more if you want to do stuff, but here's basically everything you need to run a Dungeons and Dragons game, and it's actually pretty affordable, right? Will Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast run that style? I mean, it kind of sounds like they don't have any intention of doing that, since they complained that D&D was under-monetized. The other thing is, will they put as much care and attention into the books for people like me who still like to sit across the table with my friends and roll physical dice, and order pizza or whatever else, and, will they still care about that stuff as much if they're making their money online? Like, it's pretty obvious that if you look at Marvel right now, the state of Marvel Comics, the comics are basically dead. And I'm not saying they're 100% dead. And yes, I know there's going to be people who are like, I shall go buy comics every week. I go to my local comic store. Yes, I'm not saying that doesn't still happen. But like I said, when Batman used to sell 500,000 issues a month and now he sells 100,000, and when most stuff that used to be able to sell 100,000 now sells 10,000 and can't even really be sustained, it's no accident that certain titles just keep getting canceled over and over again and relaunched, like Captain Marvel as an example, right? Even though she's had her own movie, which made $1 billion, and she's a fairly well-known character now, partly because of the movie, I think, but whatever. Truth is, though, people like me knew who she was forever, right? Like, she's been around for a long time, She was stuck in Rogue's mind for a while there. Many of us probably still remember that. She's been around forever. But the comics just don't sell. And so I think that there's a certain inevitability to this stuff as well. And as much as I might resist it or might not like it for certain reasons, the truth is that it's probably just going to happen regardless, and probably needs to happen to some degree if the hobby wants to survive. Another thing to look at the comic books, when you look at the average comic book reader today, they're mostly men in their 40s and 50s. In other words, it's the guys like me who read comics in the 80s and 90s who just grew up and kept reading comics. But they're not drawing in a lot of younger readers, right? There's no giant support base of like 20-year-old guys reading comic books and buying like 15 or 20 comics a month. And again, I'm not saying that those people don't exist. I'm just saying that the demographics as a customer base, it's just not there. It's mostly guys my age that bought comics when they were young and just kept buying comics all throughout. And when you look at things like Dungeons and Dragons, I think there was a lot of that same type of element. And many of us old school players who were around for Advanced D&D and Second Edition and Basic D&D and all that, we're still kind of looking at the game that we grew up playing. And, this is why a lot of people my age don't like 5th edition or whatever else, right? Even though I personally do. Obviously, I have a D&D channel. This is then all 5th edition. Although I might be adding in some more Pathfinder 2e stuff in the future. So, I want to talk to my players and see if they're interested in playing some Pathfinder. If not, I might just, buy the core book myself and play online with other people or whatever, right? But, I kind of want to see if my guys would be interested in doing some Pathfinder, Why not? I've had some interest in doing some Pathfinder videos, and let's face it, part of that is because Wizards of the Coast is awful. And I don't know if Paizo is actually any better, but they probably can't be worse. So, at least they haven't come out with, stances against race mix. Oh, I should mention that too, because I talked about that in my last video. They actually issued a clarification on that, which was even worse than the original statement, in my opinion. Basically, they said that it was the term half that they found to be racist, not the idea of, a male elf and a female human or vice versa falling in love. That wasn't racist. It was the term half. And it's like, so they wanted to call it something like children of two or of various humanoid species or something like that. And I was like, this is the dumbest term ever. And plus, it doesn't even tell you anything. Like, you could complain that half elf doesn't tell you what the other half is. It's just implied that it's human. Sure, fair point. But children of various humanoid species doesn't tell you anything. Maybe they're a half elf. Maybe they're a half orc, you know? I mean, at least Goliaths got their own racial term or their own species term or whatever we want to call it these days, you know? You don't have to call them a half giant. They're a Goliath. Maybe that's the answer. Make a term for half elven and just call them that. Make a term for half orcs and then just call them that instead. I don't know. But either way, that was last week's video. We're getting distracted here. I just thought it was funny that after I complained about it, then Wizards are like, we should clarify what we meant by issuing a statement that's even more ridiculous than the original. Hope that helps. Sorry, Wizards. You just can't help but hurt yourself sometimes. This is part of the frustration I have too in this video, to get back to the original topic, is we're talking about a game I love run by a company that I really don't. And, you know, that kind of causes problems sometimes when you like the game but don't necessarily like the people producing the game, you know? And it's important to be able to distinguish the art from the artist, in my opinion. But, you know, when they keep putting their foots in their mouths and broadcasting it on Twitter for the world to see, or having creator summits so that, you know, and then it gets broadcast and people like me watch it because we're interested in Dungeons and Dragons stuff, you know, you got to help yourself out a little sometimes, Wizards, you know? Maybe less sensitivity readers and more just common sense. People like proofreading your speeches. Whatever. Anyways, back to the virtual tabletop. So like I said, I see both good and bad in this. I do feel that there are ways, like I said, like Roll20, I think, does a pretty decent job of this. I haven't really tried like Foundry and some of these other ones, so I can't really speak to those specifically. But from what I've heard, they're all kind of in that same sort of mold, right? Where, you know, if you just want to be a player in a game, you can basically play basically for free. If you want to be a DM, you're probably going to have to spend a little bit more, but it's still relatively affordable. And I think something like that is perfectly fine. My fear is that Wizards will not go that route because they've already said they want to monetize the player base more, right? They feel like the game is under-monetized and they could be making a lot more money from it than they already do. And I do see, in a sense, that could like scare people off, but I also kind of feel like, you know, maybe just like the evolution of comics into movies and eventually into streaming services and Disney Plus shows or Netflix shows like the original Daredevil season 1. Even the season 2 wasn't bad, but season 1, But, you know, maybe that's just bound to happen. Maybe that's just the way things are going to go, and whether we like it or not, that's just the trajectory that we're on, you know? And maybe have to be on. Like I said, like, you know, the comics went broke eventually because there weren't enough people like me who still wanted to buy comics. And, you know, that's just a fact of life, right? It happened. But then the movies came out. The movies were kind of niche at first, but they had a couple of really good movies. And even people who weren't comic fans could still enjoy Iron Man and the original Avengers. And then things got big and everything started making tons of money. And eventually, you know, the actors started getting old. So they needed to replace them with the new generation of heroes that, you know, aren't 50-year-old people running around in superhero costumes still. And, you know, maybe now we're into that decline phase. Who knows, right? I don't know what the answers are. But, you know, the truth is that everything kind of goes through these sort of cycles. And maybe this is a D&D cycle, right? Maybe if we didn't have the virtual tabletops and stuff like that, then D&D would be a dead hobby too. Because the truth is that like 5th edition really pulled in a lot of new people, especially things like Critical Role. And a lot of people were younger. So unlike the comic books, which were unable to bring in a younger audience, but the movies did, you know, D&D seems to be finding a way to do that. And these people like virtual tabletops. And, you know, they're younger. They're more hip with this kind of stuff. They're better at the technology. They're not like me where they can barely even function, you know, on this kind of stuff. And, you know, I know how to use Discord like 10%. if somebody else has a server, I can click on it and sign in. I can do that much, and then I can talk with my microphone. But, for the most part, like, I'm old and I don't really get this stuff. But those people do. And D&D's been able to draw a lot of them in. And, you can complain that these people spend more time doing sexy tiefling art than they do actually playing the game and then publishing their art all over the internet for the rest of us to suffer. Sure, also a valid criticism. But, they are playing the game. They're spending money on the hobby. They're keeping the hobby alive. 5th edition is like the most profitable edition of Dungeons & Dragons of all time. And maybe, even though I have issues with 5th edition, like the encounter building is pretty awful, to be honest, and there are other issues as well. The truth is, maybe that's just the cycle. Maybe now we're into our Marvel Phase 2 and Phase 3 cycle, and we're staring down the future of Phase 4, and we're not liking it, where things are going, But maybe that's just where we're at. And like I said, as much as I might not like some of this, I also feel like it's inevitable. And I also feel like from Wizards of the Coast, I've spent a lot of time ripping on Wizards these last few videos, right? And with the OGL stuff too, right? I've had a lot of complaints with Wizards of the Coast. But at the end of the day, they are trying to make money and not go bankrupt the way that Marvel Comics did, and, this is just the way to do it, I think. And hopefully they find a good balance between offering us enough value for their services that we are willing to pay. Because that's the thing, too, that we haven't really talked about a lot. If D&D Beyond, or whatever it ends up being that they use, if they have like their monthly subscription, but it's awesome, then people will use it. They don't care, right? People will have Netflix accounts, right? They subscribe to that because they use Netflix all the time, and they don't care. And if you're not a TV person, you probably just cancel your Netflix subscription because you just don't care, right? But if you are, you probably like it. And maybe you have Disney Plus, and maybe you have HBO, and maybe you have a bunch of other stuff too, because you just love watching television, or you have certain shows on these networks that you don't care about, or that you don't care about paying for. I mean, you love them, so you don't care about paying the money. To you, it's worth it, And even if they drive off a certain portion of the player base, as long as it's not, all the player base, maybe this will be more profitable for them. And in some ways that could be bad for the game, but we've always got things like Pathfinder. We've got the old school Renaissance games, of which I've promoted before. We've got things like Dungeon Crawl Classics right there, which are basically like D&D Basic Expert 1 edition type derivatives, and hopefully those things continue to be popular and continue to gain even more popularity. But I don't really blame Wizards for just wanting to make more money. That's the purpose of a gaming company, That's the purpose of any company, is to make money for the shareholders and for the owners, and hopefully to pay your employees well, because that's easier to do when you're making lots of money. Not saying that they do that necessarily, because I don't know. But, hopefully they do that. And like I said, I think a certain portion of this is just what's going to happen regardless of whether we like it or not. And to me, it's more about trying to find that balance between offering people value that they want to pay for versus trying to milk them like cattle. I think Hasbro's kind of made it sound like they want to milk us like cattle more than offer us value. But we've had enough pushback and they've had enough bad press lately that, hopefully they've kind of realized, I mean, I don't know if they have or not, the OGL stuff, kind of a mixed bag. At least they finally backed down, but, they kind of, with a mask off moment, we saw their true intentions there. So I think a lot of people were not happy, including me, made videos about that too. But, at the end of the day, everything kind of goes through these sort of cycles, and as much as I don't really like it, I feel like there's a certain inevitability to all of this. So, hopefully we get good value for our money. If not, people like me just won't, bother using it, and I'll continue to play over tabletop with my friends. But, like I said, I have friends that exclusively play online. And I want the hobby to be popular. I want Dungeons and Dragons to be, cool, because I think it's cool, even though it's, definitely that niche geekdom type of stuff. But, we wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be doing this, and you wouldn't be watching me if we didn't love this game and care about its success and its future, So hopefully, like I said, like my friend's group wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the ability to online game. Now, his group exists because of Roll20, not because of the Wizards of the Coast Virtual Tabletop. But you never know. Maybe the tabletop will just be awesome. Maybe it'll draw on lots of people. And I do like the graphics and stuff. Like, the presentation looked cool. It really did, right? So, as much as I complained about a lot of the substance of it, the tabletop itself looked awesome. But it also looked like a video game. It didn't look like Dungeons & Dragons. And so again, there's kind of this conflict with me where I kind of want it to be one thing, but sort of realize it's not. But I also kind of see why it's not, and don't necessarily know that I'm right to complain about it, because, it'll probably be popular, and it'll probably make lots of money, and it'll probably be something that a lot of people get legitimate value from as well. So I guess at the end of the day, that's really what I'm hoping, is that we manage to strike that balance between offering people something they want and also remaining profitable. Because, TSR, basically went bankrupt as well. Let's not forget that, right? It wasn't just Marvel Comics, by the way, right? Like, D&D's kind of already gone through this kind of thing where, it wasn't particularly profitable, and then Wizards of the Coast basically bought them out because Wizards made all their money on other things, like the Primal Order. No, just kidding. We all know that it was from Magic the Gathering, if it wasn't for them, maybe D&D would have died decades ago. Who knows, right? So as much as I can hate on them, they also, made new additions, kept the game alive. Maybe they deserve some respect for that as well. Anyways, I'm clearly starting to ramble, so I think it's probably time to end the video there. But yeah, I just wanted to give my thoughts and ideas on what I see happening, and kind of that, maybe I think it's rough right now because we're kind of in that transition stage, and we don't know what the future of D&D is going to look like. We just know that, we like to pass. It's like Robert Conquest's 3 laws. The first law is that everybody's conservative about the things they love or the things they care about or something like that. And, it's true, right? So, it doesn't matter if you're right-wing or left-wing. When it comes to, like, preserving something you like and wanting to keep it that way, we're all incredibly right-wing. Because, it is the way we like it. And we don't want it to change necessarily, And, I think that's kind of me, where I'm still stuck in that, like, I want it with pen and paper, and I want to roll physical dice. But I also see that, it probably can't go that way forever. And it probably needs to change, Does Wizards need to change things the way they are? Who knows? But either way, I think that the online thing, online gaming in general, has been a good thing for hobbies like Dungeons & Dragons. Like I said, how many groups wouldn't have survived COVID if they couldn't have played online, right? And might have never restarted again ever, right? So, the fact that those kind of things were there, and that, like, I know people who only play online, because it's hard for them to find groups or whatever. None of their friends are into it, so they play with other people they've met online, and that's how they play. And, like I said, if it wasn't for the ability to play online, those people would never even have a chance to play D&D anymore. And so, I'm really grateful for the fact that these things do exist. I'm just worried about the way that Hasbro and Wizards kind of want to do them, I guess. That'd be my summary. So anyways, thank you for watching. I'm going to talk to my players about, like, maybe trying Pathfinder, and if so, if the response is mostly positive, then I'll be picking up some of the books. So I might do some videos in the future talking more about Pathfinder 2e. I might do them regardless, honestly, just because it gives me something new to talk about, which is kind of interesting. 5th edition has been like 10 years now, even though I haven't been making videos about it for 10 years. But, as much as I love doing like subclasses and build videos and stuff like that, we're kind of reaching the end of the 5e lifespan, or whatever, because apparently we're not going to call it 1D&D now. We're going to still just keep calling it 5th edition, even though it's really more like a 5.5 or 6th edition or whatever else. You're changing almost all the classes and subclasses and many other rules. It feels like a new edition, just saying. It feels a lot different than it was from going from 1E to 2E. I'll tell you that much. I mean, we haven't seen the final form yet, so maybe I'm wrong, but it seems a lot different so far than going from 1st to 2nd did. Anyways, like I said, that's everything. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, and sorry about rambling at the end, even more than usual, and I'll see you next time. Bye.